Well, good evening, everyone. We're delighted to be back with you after a long 2-year hiatus. Welcome to Washington Policy Center's 2021 Eastern Washington Annual Dinner here in Spokane. Now, how we know this is a successful event is because we've had a ton of people come to registration who weren't necessarily registered, and they just heard about it, wanted to come, or were invited by all of our great table sponsors out there. So bear with us as we try to accommodate everyone, and we appreciate everyone's cooperation in that. I'm Chris Cargill, the Eastern Washington Director of Washington Policy Center. We want to welcome you and those of you from across the state of Washington who are participating in these events, not only here at the Davenport Grand Hotel, but also online, virtually. We have folks from all across the country who are tuning in this evening. A quick reminder, if you get up from your tables, please wear your mask. We want to make sure that we follow our contractual guidelines and obligations to those who may have health issues. Because of COVID, last year's event was a virtual event, but we returned to a successful annual dinner in Bellevue just 2 weeks ago. Tonight, we're of course back here in Spokane, and it is so great to see so many familiar faces. All told, with our 2 events, both here in Spokane and in Bellevue, we will have more than 2,000 people participating in a Washington Policy Center annual dinner event this year. Of course, the last 18 months have been filled with a lot of challenges for all of us. But tonight we're here to celebrate all of you, celebrate the work of Washington Policy Center, and this, our 25th anniversary year. So we invite you to sit back, enjoy your company, enjoy your food, enjoy the evening, and be inspired. To get things started tonight, would you please help me welcome from KXLY 920 News Now, Teresa Lukens.
I want to start by saying that my seat is for sale for $500. No, kidding. It is indeed a pleasure to be here tonight with all of you. A pleasure to be anywhere anymore. I don't know about you, but I have a newfound appreciation for large gatherings, small gatherings, a couple people in my kitchen. It's all good to me now. And I knew I was excited to be here tonight when I actually got enthused about putting on a pair of Spanx again. Am I right, Chris? Yeah? Thank you to Chris, and thank you to the Washington Policy Center. Most importantly, thank you to Spokane and the Inland Northwest. I have to tell you, too, that I am so thrilled to be here with you this evening to hear from Dr. Ben Carson, absolutely. To also honor former Congressman George Nethercutt. And of course, to highlight the work of Washington Policy Center. We want to get started by asking everyone to silence your phones, but don't let them get too far away. Feel free to take photos and share on social media. There are a lot of people who wanted to be here tonight and just couldn't be, so we're going to help them out by taking some pictures and sharing on social media. Let's begin by honoring America. Please stand for our Pledge of Allegiance. And to lead us in the pledge, WPC board member Kate Lamson of Lamson Crane in the Tri-Cities. Kate is actually pinch hitting for Pillar Society member Nate Higgins, who is under the weather this evening. Kate.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Kate. Please remain standing. Gotcha. And welcome to the stage the concert choir from the Palisades Christian Academy in West Spokane for the national anthem under the direction of Miss Alexis Reed. That was beautiful. Thank you. It's now time for our invocation. Please welcome longtime WPC supporter and former member of WPC's Board of Directors, Judy Williams. 3 generations of the Williams family support WPC, and we are grateful. Judy?
Yeah, it's bright. Okay. Let us pray. Father God, surround us now as we gather in this place. Keep us humble with respect and honor us with your grace. We pray for all our leaders who guide us here at home. We pray for those elected, no matter where they roam. Tonight, dear Lord, we're listening to the words our speakers say. Those words they say inspire us to bow our heads and pray. Thank you, Lord, for all you are and for all you do. We pray you give us wisdom and unite us in freedom too. We're gathered here to celebrate and hear a message so true. We pray that you will bless us and draw us close to you. And thank you for this banquet and all who serve us now, and bless this food before us and keep us healthy somehow. As we are all Americans, let freedom be our creed. Forgive us when we fail you, and honor word and deed. Please bless our time and fellowship as we join our hands in prayer. We ask this in our Savior's name as we take this time to share. Amen.
Thank you, Judy. Beautiful words. If you haven't already, we invite you to begin enjoying your salad, please. We're going to proceed while we thank and recognize some of the important people tonight. At table 17, the annual dinner co-chairs, Ron and Heidi Stanley. The two have been working on this event for a year now, and of course, we appreciate their support. We also want to recognize Congresswoman Kathy McMorris Rogers with us this evening. The Honorable Mayor of Spokane, Nadine Woodward, also here. Central Washington Congressman Dan Newhouse. And State House Minority Leader J.T. Wilcox. In fact, can we have all of our elected officials please stand and be recognized? Thank you so much for your service. We'd like to take a moment now to recognize the top sponsors for tonight's evening. Brian Haywood, Bill and Judy Williams, Kent and Bonnie Clausen, Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories, Wells Fargo, Washington Trust Bank, Chris and Daleen Patterson, the Building Industry Association of Washington, Empire Bolt, the Washington Farm Labor Association, the Washington State Farm Bureau, William Junkermeyer, Ann and Stacy Coles, and the Source of Spokane. A complete list of table and event sponsors is in your program, and we will be recognizing the Pillars Society coming up. Thank you to all of the sponsors for your support. As many of you may know, about a year ago, Washington Policy Center launched an ambitious campaign to counter the rise and popularity of socialism among younger populations. The goal has always been to showcase the power of the free market in a language that young people can understand. After testing messages on social media platforms, it was clear that the creative destruction was the best chance. The free market destroys the things we all hate: disease, hunger, boredom, high rents, climate change, and much more. Tonight, we'd like to share with you the newest part of the campaign, a groundbreaking video boosted nationally that proves the free market destroys racism.
So, we all know capitalism is just a cover for racism, right? What could be more obvious than that?
Yeah, racism is integrally linked to capitalism.
We won't get rid of that racist culture until we get rid of capitalism.
I classify racism and capitalism as these conjoined twins.
You hear that line everywhere. This line gets reality exactly backwards. Over and over, capitalism has actually proven to be a powerful force in the fight against racism. And one of the best examples of capitalism smashing racism is this, right here. A seemingly simple, bland, century-old mail order catalog. This isn't a relic, it's a revelation. The ultimate example of free markets destroying racism. Zoom back to the Jim Crow South. Racist laws are forcing rural black families into sharecropping, a brutal arrangement requiring them to work someone else's land for low pay. Without a steady cash flow, these families can't buy anything without credit. But local stores would often deny credit for items deemed too white, like luxury items. Or stores would simply ban black customers from their stores entirely. They couldn't spend their money, even if they wanted to. This is the desperate situations blacks found themselves in. How could they possibly skirt racist laws and get access to the items needed to run their lives. Where would the solution come from? Let's pause for a second to see what's really going on here. Racism was costing brick-and-mortar stores money. Store owners were artificially suppressing their own sales when they turned away black customers. As the famed economist Thomas Sowell explains, their bigotry came at a cost. Racism is depriving them of customers.
In a competitive industry, discrimination costs the discriminator as well as the others.
Sowell points out that markets actually make racism costly.
Well, the market puts a price on discrimination.
In the Jim Crow era, though, government wasn't bearing the cost of its bigotry. Businesses, not politicians, were paying the literal price for racism.
One of the reasons we had a Jim Crow era in this country was because the politicians didn't pay the price of that.
But there's a flip side to that cost. Jim Crow laws and practices were creating a huge, underserved customer base. These laws were accidentally generating an enormous market opportunity. Black customers are earning money, and they want to spend it on high-quality brand-name goods. It's just a matter of the right entrepreneur stepping in to meet that demand. Enter the Jeff Bezos of his day, Richard Sears. Before Amazon or Walmart, the biggest name in American retail was the company he founded, Sears, Roebuck & Company. And he comes up with a product that's the perfect tool for skirting racist laws, the Sears Mail Order Catalog, like having Amazon in your hand. Popularized in 1900s, the catalog gave black families a way to buy high-quality goods on credit without ever encountering racist laws or store owners. Hundreds of pages, free rural delivery. The impact of the catalog was particularly noticeable in the development of black music. In 1908, the catalog starts selling steel string guitars for less than $2. Sales of those guitars were crucial to the development of the Delta Blues. Blues legend B.B. King learned how to play from a book he bought from Sears. The catalog quickly became the main way black customers accessed high-end goods, and it evolved as local racist politicians and companies tried to crack down. Sears made a point of saying all shipments were confidential, and when racist country stores started refusing to sell black buyers the stamps needed to mail their orders, Sears added instructions for how customers could ask their local postman to put in orders on their behalf. The commerce facilitated by the catalog had broader humanizing effects. With every purchase, Sears was reinforcing the notion that even if someone doesn't look like you, they're still worth serving, still worth helping. Properly channeled, entrepreneurship punishes discrimination and rewards anti-racism. This is a dynamic at work all the time in the open market. In the landmark Supreme Court case Plessy versus Ferguson, profit-hungry railroads joined forces with civil rights groups to legally challenge segregation laws. The artificial seat vacancies were costing them money. Or look at taxi cabs, another government-created cartel. Black travelers often couldn't get rides because of discrimination by old-school cab drivers. Uber and Lyft gave them another option, a way to skirt discrimination and bust their state monopoly at the same time. Entrepreneur Robert Johnson noticed a lack of television programming for black audiences, started a channel geared specifically to them, and became the country's first black billionaire. John Johnson noticed a similar gap in the magazine market and launched Ebony, which eventually grew to nearly 2 million subscribers, more than half that of Life, the most popular magazine in America at the time. These are just a few examples of the thousands of businesses that have sprung up to cater to underserved groups, often spearheaded by people of color themselves. America's diverse entrepreneurs continue to shape our future through the people they serve. Racists have often co-opted the power of state to erect prejudicial laws and policies. And free markets have smashed them. Sears laid the groundwork for online shopping and proved that free markets create an incentive to serve others regardless of who they are, what they look like, or if we agree with them. And businesses who don't soon find competition taking their place. But the fight to destroy racism isn't over. through free market innovation and competition, together, we can create a more equal and just world.
Now, that's a message a lot of young people haven't heard before. Maybe you haven't heard it either, but it's a message people need to hear, and we're taking it throughout Washington state and beyond. We hope everyone in this room will take time to like our Free Markets Destroy social media challenge. Check out the freemarketsdestroy.com and put this message before as many young people as you possibly can. It's because our future depends on it. My name is Mark Pinkowski, and I have the privilege of serving as chairman of the board of the Washington Policy Center. Our work would not be possible without our supporters. All of you in this room this evening, all of you joining us virtually, who invest in free market ideas. I'd like to take just a moment to recognize three significant contributors to the Policy Center. Al Symington passed away on March 19th at the age of 81. Al had a remarkable career in the timber industry, managing complex projects and creating millions of dollars in value. He was heavily involved with setting up WPC's financial accounting system and its finance committee. And he helped develop one of WPC's first research centers, the Center for the Environment. And that was back in the early 2000s with Jim Day and others. Al Symington was a true friend of WPC and will long be remembered. David Marriott also served on the board of directors for a number of years. He and his wife, Sally, hosted our Evening in the Desert in Palm Springs, which included speakers like Dinesh D'Souza and economists like Stephen Moore. Their hospitality was key in building those events into major WPC traditions. David was an industrious man and successful in the family business, which was the American Linen Supply Company. He loved and was a skilled and competitive sailor, an avid skier, a frequent golfer, and David was generous with his home and his ideas, putting his passion into the Washington Policy Center as he did so much of his life. And he passed away at the age of 84 in September. Roberta Weymouth was a longtime and current WPC board member when she passed away in May of this year. Roberta was 80. She was elected to our board of directors in 2005 and was an active member of the annual dinner and Jennifer Dunn Thompson Scholarship committees throughout her tenure. She and her husband Jim opened the first Silver Cloud Hotel in 1980. Roberta's respect and appreciation for those who worked to make Silver Cloud Hotel successful was reflected in the universal admiration she enjoyed by those who worked with her, and that includes helping to find summer positions for one of our charter school recipients. She was the kind of person that made everyone she met feel special and every cause seem possible. Roberta made the world a better place. We're thankful for Roberta and Jim's financial support of WPC and for their ongoing support of our Jennifer Dunn Thompson Scholarship. Numerous female college students have benefited from their generosity. So please pause with me for just a moment of silence as we remember Al Symington, David Marriott, and Roberta Weymouth, true giants of the Washington Policy Center. Thank you. They will not be forgotten. So if you'll indulge me for just a minute longer, I'd like to acknowledge an individual who's devoted 20 years of his life to Washington Policy Center. I don't know where Dan's standing or sitting, but if he can stand, without Dan Mead Smith, the Washington Policy Center would not be what it is today. And I'd ask all of us to show appreciation for Dan's work over these many years with a round of applause. Thank you, Dan. Okay, on with the program. My fellow board members are really remarkable people, and they excel in their fields of expertise. The same is true of the Washington Policy Center staff, as you're going to hear in a moment. There are reasons that legislators, citizen activists, and media seek them out for their expertise. It's because our research is solid and reliable, and we offer new approaches to policy that increase choice, competition, and improve results. For those of you who value the opportunity, choices, prosperity, and freedom that free markets create in our state, Washington Policy Center is an investment in ensuring those values are carried forward into our future and the futures of our children and our grandchildren. Can we count on you to make an investment tonight? Your support of the Washington Policy Center ensures we continue to fight for your freedoms and make our state a better place to live, raise a family, own a business, and get an education. As you consider your contribution, I'd like you to hear firsthand about WPC in action and how your support is directly making an impact. You're going to hear from each of our center directors, and you want to pay attention because they have some wonderful things to share this evening. I am pleased to introduce Washington Policy Center's research staff, led by our Vice President of Research, Paul Guppy. Paul?
Thanks, Mark. As Vice President of the Washington Policy Center, it's my job to ensure the accuracy and the quality of our research program. Over 25 years, Washington Policy Center has built a solid reputation for honesty and reliability in our published work. We've noticed that our opponents on the other side of the issues, left-leaning groups, tend to rise quickly and then disappear just as quickly. So our constant presence and staying power has had a lot to do with our success. And our reliability and professionalism continues to increase our impact. So when I joined the Policy Center years ago, we had exactly one full-time researcher. That was me. Today, we have 8 research centers plus regular contributions by outside experts and our research fellows. So our critics often disagree with our recommendations, but they have found that they can't disagree with our data and our analysis. We've noticed that attacks on our work have fallen virtually to zero, even as some of the name-calling has increased. So this was illustrated recently when we did a public records request of the internal emails at the Department of Transportation, and they revealed that there was a discussion inside the department about Maria Frost's latest report on transportation issues. They certainly disagreed with what she had to say, but they couldn't disagree with her facts. So ensuring quality and accuracy is made manifestly easier by the integrity and the ability of our research staff, each of whom show individual initiative, determination, and courage, and perseverance every day in pursuing their work. So they are a strongly outspoken bunch, as you will hear, but their tenacity makes WPC's research very effective. So now we'll have a few minutes of remarks from each of them, reporting on their top achievements for this year. And we'll start with an update from Jason at our Center for Government Reform. Jason.
Well, thank you, Paul. I am Jason Mercier, the Government Reform Director for the Policy Center, and I want to touch on 4 priorities that we've worked on this year. And the first is protecting Washington's competitive advantage of no income tax. And we've been doing that by trying to We've been working to overturn the new capital gains income tax, and I did not stutter. It is an income tax. We were actively involved with our friends at the Opportunity for All Coalition, identifying the plaintiffs. All of them are Washington Policy Center members, and several in the audience today. And we're working weekly with the attorneys as this litigation moves through the courts and we'll be working with national tax experts on an amicus. Now, along with the state income tax, we're trying to close the door that the Court of Appeals surprisingly opened in 2019 to a local income tax. And thankfully, the voters in Spokane helped get this party started in 2019 when 72% of you voted for a charter amendment to ban a local income tax. We are now up to 10 municipalities, cities and counties with a local income tax ban, and in fact, Yakima will be voting on one in a few weeks. Now, stopping taxes isn't enough. It is time to cut taxes. Let me paint the picture for you. The budget is balanced. We have billions in reserves. We have billions in federal COVID relief funds that we don't even know what to do with. Since the legislature left, $3.6 billion in unanticipated revenue. And in fact, just today, that revenue increased by another $153 million. Now, the governor has an idea with what to do with this. A few weeks ago, he agreed to pay raises, $450 million of pay raises for state employees. If we can afford a pay raise, we can afford a tax cut. It is time to cut the sales tax. And finally, emergency powers reform. Case counts are down, vaccination rates are up. The governor has no metrics for when he will ease his mandates and return control back to the legislature. Just yesterday, he imposed new mandates, and we are hearing in a few weeks even more will be coming. It is time to stop being governed by press conference. We have 147 lawmakers who have a constitutional responsibility to govern on our behalf through a public process, and we need to get back to that. And we will be making emergency powers reform a top priority next session. Thank you for your support.
Good evening. I'm Lieve Finna, Director for Education at Washington Policy Center. Our main goal is to expand school choice and empower parents in the education of their children. This year, the legislature repealed our voter-approved charter school law, but importantly, 14 charter schools remain open, serving about 4,000 families, and 2 more charters made the deadline to open next year. The overwhelming issue, though, was working to reopen schools safely, as you all recall. Last fall, that is the fall 2020, private schools and public charter schools fully reopened, while most schools in traditional districts remain closed. Then in February, I published research showing Washington State ranked 47th in the nation in reopening schools to in-person instruction. 47th in the nation, you all know that's among the last. 47 out of 50 states, remember. That's not a good number. The resulting media coverage that got everyone's attention highlighted the issue, and 2 weeks later, the governor announced a plan to reopen the public schools. So that was a good thing. More work remains, but families are finally seeing positive results. Our research also highlighted the harmful impact of the critical race theory bill the governor signed in May. We published a study on the civil rights implications, the resulting decline in academic standards, and the frustration of parents who can't get the system to focus on the core learning that their children need. All of this has led to a national surge across the entire country in school choice. My recent study lists 18 states that have just expanded school choice programs as more parents seek to escape from low standards and endless controversy in the public schools. Clearly, more choice and parent engagement are the future of public education. We are working to overcome We at Washington Policy Center are working to overcome harmful ideologies like critical race theory and to shake up, very harmful, and you'll like this, and to shake up the education establishment in our state. Our message is clear. The system must expand choices for parents so parents can recenter public education to meet the needs of their children. Thank you. Now we have Elizabeth.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Hovde. I came on board in January as Washington Policy Center's Director for Healthcare and Worker Rights. That was just in time to present our work to the legislature in the recent legislative session. In one hearing, I provided research on how soda taxes harm business and do nothing for public health. That bill failed, tried to impose a Seattle-style tax on the rest of the state, and then died in committee. Next, we helped stop a bill to impose yet another costly tax on private health insurance, and we argued successfully against imposing a government-controlled healthcare system in our state. Much of my work, however, yes, it comes up every year. They try for universal healthcare. Much of my work, however, involved an issue that hit both healthcare and worker rights. A continuing long-term care payroll tax will be taken from workers' paychecks starting in January. Boo, Schweitzer. Boo loudest. The new tax is 50 cents on every $100 earned with no income limit. We have repeatedly informed people how to opt out of the tax, but that option has largely expired. Some lawmakers are using our research to speak out against this unfair law. We recommend they repeal it. There is also a ballot initiative, and it would essentially repeal the law as well. We'll keep watch. The more people learn about the state's mandated long-term care program, the less they like it. It's even a bad deal for low-income workers. They lose part of their household budget today for an insufficient benefit that they might not need or they might not even get, along with a lot of other Washingtonians. Thanks for being here tonight. You make our research and education possible. Mark Harmsworth.
It's great to see you here this evening, guys. If I could see you, because these lights are really bright, so you're just out there. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mark Harmsworth. I'm the director of the Center Small Business. I'm a former state representative, and my most important job tonight was your doorman to make sure you got in here okay. So we've had quite a year in the legislature. We started out with the Nigerian fraud. 650 million of our dollars went down the drain. That's $100 per citizen here. And we exposed that fraud, and we worked to make sure that the press knew about what was going on, and we did a lot of material on that to make sure that everyone was educated about the fraud and basically ineptitude that was going on in the Employment Security Department. And we educated them not to click on the link from the Nigerian prince to send them the money. I mean, that's 101 in government, right? Second up, we worked on the construction. Who here knows the difference between private construction and public construction? Well, neither did the government, unfortunately, and they shut down, exactly, BIOW there, yeah. They shut down the private construction, so we worked, produced a lot of material to help the different industries that were working behind the scenes to get our private industry reopened again. We've also been working at a lot of different things around small business sales tax. How many small business owners do we have here? How many love paying taxes? None of you, I suspect, right? So we've got a piece right now that helps small business on tax reform. If you don't generate too much tax, then we've got some ideas around that to help that through. I'm a small business owner, and I spend an inordinate amount of time wasting time filling out forms, filing taxes, B&O, and all the different sales taxes in the different jurisdictions. we have something for that as well. And then coming up, we have a study on business licensing reform, which still is a mess in this state, despite having voted on that when I was in the legislature to make it better. It's not quite there yet. So we're going to continue fighting for reform, help our small business, get those taxes down, and get those jobs created, right? Yeah. Thank you for coming. This is Pam Lewis, Ag.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Pam Lewis, and I am the Initiative on Agriculture Director. Thank you for your support, and thank you for coming this evening. The Ag Initiative has done a great many things this year, including modifying unfair COVID rules, correcting misinformation about the working conditions on Washington's farms, and providing the sole voice to argue against the absurd notion that farmers only work part-time and offering essential policy research about farm worker pay. And that's the one I'm going to talk about a little bit tonight. There was an unfair decision in November of 2020 that repealed Washington's farm worker rules. This Supreme Court ruling forced dairies to begin paying time and a half for all farm workers after 40 hours. During the most recent legislative session, lawmakers with no working knowledge of farms and ranches in our state pushed to force this same pay structure onto the rest of the agricultural community immediately. Our research showed the need for a phased-in approach that gives farmers and ranchers the opportunity to ask for flexibility in the coming legislative session. Growing food is not factory work. Farmers and ranchers need flexibility to plan their work year, with a special focus on the urgent time pressures of harvest. And this fight is not over. Ultimately, farm workers will be the people who are punished by this new pay structure, because farmers and their workers depend on each other. Without the success of a farm, farm workers are unemployed. And without farm workers, a farm is unsuccessful. Both groups are shaped by the unique realities of producing food, something that city-based lawmakers find hard to understand. With your continued support, we can continue to talk about this and give every part of the agricultural community the opportunity to earn a living and provide food like the meal in front of you tonight. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Maria Frost, Director of the Cole Center for Transportation. This year, we tackled the governor's abuse of his legislative authority to transfer money within the transportation budget after the legislature adjourned. Under current law, the Department of Transportation, a cabinet agency, can transfer money among projects to deliver them efficiently. But in 2019, Governor Inslee abused this authority by shifting $149 million from transportation projects to fish passage barrier replacement without legislative approval, on top of the $100 million increase the legislature had already appropriated for barrier replacement. This significant transfer was rightly criticized by lawmakers on both sides of the aisle as a circumvention of the elected legislature. To prevent future abuse, we recommended restricting how much the governor can transfer, and the legislature adopted our recommendation and capped the governor's transfer authority. By enacting these practical reforms, lawmakers helped ensure that needed transportation projects are delivered to the public as promised. Looking ahead, we are updating our 5 Principles of Responsible Transportation Policy document, which is a foundational piece that shows lawmakers and the public what we value in free market transportation policy. So those principles are honoring people's freedom to choose how they live, work, travel, by responding to market demand rather than spending money on projects people don't want. Encouraging lawmakers to fund congestion relief to give people access to more job opportunities. Supporting user fees that let people pay directly for highways and receive a clear and direct benefit in return. Improving freight mobility, which is key to our state's economic strength. And lastly, encouraging a supportive regulatory environment for developing new transportation technology. Personal mobility is essential to living in freedom and to our ability to connect with each other as a community, to raise our families, to run our businesses, and to access jobs. At the Cole Center for Transportation, we are going to continue to work to make sure that public policy serves the transportation needs of everyone in our state. Thank you.
So good evening. So I'm Todd Myers. I'm the environmental director. Or as somebody came up to me earlier tonight and said, hey, you're the B guy. I am the B guy. Washington Policy Center continues to be the best source for reporting environmental data that the media and environmental activists too often ignore. Environmental myth-busting has become an important part of simply ensuring that politicians and policymakers have accurate and science-based information. So, for example, this year, left-wing environmental groups claimed that Snake River Chinook salmon were on the path to extinction, actually something that the governor echoed this morning in the Spokesman Review. They predicted fish returns would be smaller this year than last. We predicted the opposite. We said that they would increase this year, and we were right. Spring and summer Chinook returns on the Snake increased 17% this year over last. And we also predict that they will be even larger next year. So, to back that up, I offered a $50 bet to anyone in the environmental community who thinks that populations will decline next year. Not surprisingly, no environmental activist has taken the bet. Somebody did offer to bet me $5,000, but I don't make enough to make that kind of bet, so please give generously tonight. Second, when a radical group in eastern Washington sued to stop the Forest Service from thinning fire-prone forests, we pointed out that not only were the forests badly in need of treatment, but that thinning had been requested by the Colville Confederated Tribe, who saw the threat of catastrophic wildfire on the border of their reservation. Additionally, we've highlighted the failure of the state to keep its promises to reduce CO2 emissions and to recover salmon statewide. Without the Washington Policy Center, the repeated failures of left-wing environmental policies would be ignored by the public and the public would never hear the truth. This is critical, not only because Washington's environmental policies are wasteful and ineffective, but because it is time for a new path on environmental policy. And next year, we are offering that new path. So next year, my second published book will be released in the fall, showing how individuals and companies working in a free market are already doing more for the environment than the 1970s top-down environmental approach. Using small technologies, people are already reducing ocean plastic, providing clean water in Africa, protecting endangered wildlife, and conserving energy. By telling the truth about the failures of left-wing environmentalism and empowering people to do what government cannot, we can help preserve the environment and promote prosperity that is the hallmark of free markets. And now, please direct your attention to the screens for a short video.
When people ask me about the importance of Washington Policy Center, I start to think of what the state would look like if it never existed. Imagine the choices that would have been lost, the competitive disadvantages we'd face with seemingly countless tax proposals, including income taxes that would be imposed by now. WPC has been incredibly influential as a force for open government and free market reform. despite being in the midst of an ideologically hostile state.
Washington Policy Center started with a group of dedicated people who believed our state needed an informed voice on free market principles. It's provided media, lawmakers, and citizen activists a level of expertise they didn't have access to before.
We've been able to show time and again that supposedly environmental policies proposed by activists are inefficient, would create heavy costs for taxpayers, and a minimal benefit for the environment. My research is showing how individual action and market choices make a real, substantial environmental benefit possible right now.
I fought the income tax battle year after year. It's like the income tax version of Groundhog's Day. 10 straight times the voters have overwhelmingly said no. They keep trying and we keep winning. And there's no doubt our research and recommendations have helped Washington avoid an income tax and be more transparent to citizens.
The Cole Center for Transportation has exposed politically motivated delays in state transportation projects and the increasing refusal of the State Department of Transportation to support congestion relief and freedom of mobility.
And Washington Policy Center isn't just fighting the fight for right now, they're fighting for the next generation as well. Our Young Professionals organization provides exclusive networking, mentorships, and learning opportunities for those under age 40. And the efforts of the YP program on college campuses are bringing free market perspectives to free market deserts, with audiences after our events routinely admitting they'd never heard the free market perspective before.
It's amazing what Washington Policy Center has become today. It's nationally respected. Its work is cited in the media up to 7 times a day. It's relied on by lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, and it's truly committed to the whole of the state. From Vancouver to Bellingham, and from Seattle to Spokane and all parts in between. This state is our home. We're making a difference, and we won't surrender.
Good evening, and thank you so much for being here tonight. My name's Julie Shifflet. I am that's my table. I am a local small business owner and a longtime supporter of the Washington Policy Center because I believe in free markets and making informed decisions. So how many of you remember when this was where you went for your information, the voter's pamphlet, to be able to make a vote? Right? So for the last 25 years, I've gone to the Washington Policy Center to understand how I want to vote. I have been looking at their citizens' guides for ballot initiatives. I count on the Washington Policy Center to deliver to me data, facts, analysis, not media hype and emotional rhetoric. Washington Policy Center provides our legislators, our concerned citizens, and private industry with reliable, honest recommendations based on irrefutable analysis and research that you just heard these people talk about, what they're preparing and putting out there. So for 25 years, I've counted on Washington Policy Center for information so I can make informed and conscious choices. So if, like me, you think Washington State might just be on a tipping point and you don't want it to tip over, we need to have the Washington Policy Center working hard for us every day. As a nonprofit think tank that supports sound public policy, Washington Policy Center relies on donations. Donations from all of us here in this room tonight to be able to continue its work and fulfill its mission. The Washington Policy Center's mission is to improve the lives of Washington State's citizens by providing our policymakers, the media, and the general public with accurate, high-quality research. So I believe everyone deserves an equal chance. And tonight, you all have an equal chance to give. So, thank you. That must again be my table. So every place setting has a card. And that card looks like this, and it's for giving. So I'm going to take a pause. I'm going to let all of you find your card and the ink pens that are provided on the table. And I'm going to ask your table host to feel free to hand out the ink pens and the cards to the guests. And then when you're done, you can place them in this really brightly covered envelope. It's red. It's one of my favorite colors, red. I think it's a good color choice for tonight. And I don't want those people who are joining us, if you know, there are people who could not be here tonight who have joined us remotely. And so if you're remote and you don't have one of these great cards, which by the way is about the size of a nice big check, if you don't have one of those, you can go to washingtonpolicy.org and click on that red donate button and be part of tonight. So like you, I already paid to be here tonight. But I will be making an additional 100% tax-deductible donation. Because I believe we need the Washington Policy Center to stop our state income tax. We need the Washington Policy Center to protect our farmers from ridiculous, over-the-top, Seattle-influenced regulations. I know I have some Ellensburg farmers here tonight. I believe we need the Washington Policy Center to keep us informed on what's really happening in Olympia. And because I believe we need the Washington Policy Center to protect our Snake River dams that we depend on for transportation of those agriculture products. And because we need the Washington Policy Center to expand and keep our school choice for how we want our children educated. I also believe this is our year in Eastern Washington. This is the year that we can actually, for the first time, outraise Bellevue at our dinner. So, I don't know the count tonight, but Bellevue had 1,000 people show up, and I'm pretty sure we're close to double that number. So I could ask each of you to give a minimum $150. Everybody in this room gave a minimum of $150. That's what it would take to beat Bellevue. But I'm going to ask you to give more, because I'm going to give more this year. I'm going to put 2 checks in mine. One for what I'm giving this year, and one for what I would have given last year if we'd have been able to do this in person. Because I believe now more than ever, we need the integrity of the Washington Policy Research and Publications. And that, so as you're writing out your check or filling out your card, I want us to just take a moment on this 25th anniversary of the Washington Policy Center and consider, what would our state be like if the Washington Policy Center had not been here for the last 25 years? Because without the Washington Policy Center, we could not have overturned the legislature's numerous attempts at imposing a state income tax. Woohoo, here's my table's donations. Here's my red envelope. So I also believe that if the Washington Policy Center had not been here for the last 25 years, we would not have those 14 charter schools. Without the Washington Policy Center, we would not have the ability for all of us here to provide remote testimony to Olympia, further limiting the voice of Eastern Washington. Without the Washington Policy Center, our local governments in our state would be trying to adopt local income taxes. Instead, with the Washington Policy Center's help, they are adopting income tax bans, led by Spokane. So in short, big government politicians in our state would not be able to get away with so much of what they want to achieve here without the work of this organization. The Washington Policy Center holds our legislators and big politicians from outside of Washington accountable. So with that in mind, take your envelopes, insert a check, or insert your credit card. I'll be in the back room later as we open these up, and I'll just fill out the donation for you, and we'll mail you your credit card back. So join me in supporting the organization that supports all of us in maintaining our free markets and supporting sound public policy decisions in Washington State, the Washington Policy Center. So thank you so much for your donations, and thank you for being here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. A passionate plea. I don't know what you're running for, but I'm voting. Thank you for your involvement with WPC on the Eastern Washington Advisory Board, as well as being a Pillar Society member. All right, so please continue to fill out those forms and place them in the red envelopes. We're going to pause now for dinner, allow you the opportunity to enjoy your meal and to chat with your table guests, and we will be back in about 15 minutes.
My name is Greg Porter. I am the president of the Pillar Society. I have to tell you, the Washington Policy Center is the best organization I have ever been involved with, an organization that affects every person in the state of Washington in a positive manner, and I couldn't be more proud to be associated with the center.
Pillar Society members pledge $5,000 or more per year for 3 years. They've been instrumental in providing financial stability and seed money for strategic initiatives.
You have to have funding in order to support the agenda. It takes a lot of resources to accomplish these objectives, and WPC deserves having people in the Pillar Society that are really passionate about its mission, who are willing to put their money up in order to make their work more effective.
Thanks to Pillar Society members, WPC countered the growing popularity of socialism in younger generations with Free Markets Destroy, an innovative campaign aimed at millennials and Gen Zs, highlighting the opportunities and prosperity created by free markets. They were also instrumental in WPC's successful efforts to bring choice to our state education system through charter schools, and were key to establishing WPC's Young Professionals program to cultivate free market leadership in those under 40. And Pillar Society members were essential in the launching of our work on agricultural policy and in our ongoing fight to keep Washington income tax free.
If you believe in the free enterprise system, if you believe the free enterprise system is the reason we've had the success in this nation, the reason that we've had the individual growth in this nation and would continue to have it, I'd say this is the group that you want to belong to.
From exclusive events with nationally recognized speakers to wine tastings and VIP opportunities at WPC annual dinner events, Pillar Society members network with like-minded, highly successful people. Members come for free market policy and find lifelong connections and friendships along the way.
I think one of the biggest advantages of being part of this organization, it's really a think tank of the greatest minds, not only in our community, but in business, and gives you an opportunity to get involved where you need to.
If I were trying to convince a friend to join WPC, I think I would emphasize the nonpartisan aspect of it.
Wells Fargo is really pleased to support the Washington Policy Center. And as I think about all of our involvement and our engagement across the state, it goes hand in hand with the issues that WPC is most concerned about.
Outstanding.
Freedom. Exciting. Necessary.
Fun.
Dynamic.
Awesome.
Credible.
Thorough and thoughtful. That's two.
Intentional.
Balanced. Proactive. Impact.
Impactful.
Impactful.
Impactfully necessary.
Effectiveness. Effective.
Effective.
Can I get all of the members of the Pillar Society to either stand or raise your hand? Thank you for your commitment and what you make possible to accomplish. You have really become the foundation of the Washington Policy Center. If you're interested in becoming a member of the Pillar Society, you can join us tonight with a contribution. There's more information at the center of your table. If you check the box that you are interested in joining on the giving card on your table, WPC's Development Director, Sydney Jansen, will follow up and get you more information. Thank you. Tonight, we also have the opportunity to announce WPC's annual Jennifer Dunn Thompson Scholarship. And to do that, please welcome WPC President Dan Mead Smith.
Thank you, Teresa. As Teresa said, I'm Dan Mead Smith, the president of the Washington Policy Center. Every year, through the generosity of 3 board members, Washington Policy Center honors the legacy of our great friend, the late Congresswoman Jennifer Dunn, with a $15,000 overall scholarship program in her name. Our committee chooses the recipient based on some of the characteristics that Jennifer both valued and embodied as a key leader in our state. We look for a young woman who values service to others, civics, and who possesses the qualities of leadership that Jennifer Dunn exemplified. Please join me tonight in recognizing this year's recipient of the Jennifer Dunn Thompson Scholarship, Olivia Johnston. She's a recent graduate of Gonzaga University with a bachelor's degree in business administration and a minor in pre-law writing. She has been a key leader of our club at Gonzaga, which has 2 tables here to my right. She is going to use her scholarship tonight for her education. She's seeking a law degree at the University of Idaho with the goal of becoming an attorney. She says she wants to become a lawyer to represent others' interests as her own, to work on something I believe in, she says. So please join me in recognizing Olivia Johnston for exemplifying the talent, leadership, commitment to public service, and personal values of Jennifer Dunn Thompson, and for representing the bright promise of a rising generation and a willingness to carry Jennifer's ideals into the future, presented tonight, October 15th in Spokane, Washington. Congratulations.
Oh.
Camera guy.
Thank you. Yes, please. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Thank you to the Washington Policy Center for giving me this great honor. I am thrilled to be here tonight at this special event. I realize the significance of this scholarship. Jennifer Dunn has left a remarkable legacy that allows young women to achieve their goals that surround a love for public policy and for the American spirit that lives right here in Washington State.
I am currently pursuing a Juris Doctorate, and with this education, I strive to carry on the same trailblazing, ambitious, and strong determination that is required of women who create a better and kinder future for everyone. Jennifer was an exemplary woman, and once again, I cannot express how grateful I am to be this year's recipient. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate
Of
it.
course, thanks for being here. And let me just take a moment. This is my last annual dinner as president of the Washington Policy Center to say how much I've appreciated your support of Washington Policy Center here in Eastern Washington. When I became president 20 years ago, we formed an Eastern Washington Advisory Board, which was instrumental in increasing our impact here on the east side of the state. We then opened our Eastern Washington office 12 years ago, and I don't think we could have ever imagined an event like this and the tremendous impact that all your support is having. I personally want to thank all of you for being here tonight and for all of your support, whether this is your first event or you've been here for the last 12. Opening an Eastern Washington office was one of the most important things we ever did as an organization, and you responded beyond our wildest expectations. Thank you for all of your support, and I look forward to staying connected with all of you in the Spokane and Eastern Washington area. Teresa, back to you.
Thank you, Dan, and best wishes in your new adventure, and congratulations to Olivia. Every year, Washington Policy Center selects one person of distinction who has devoted themselves to being a champion of freedom, someone whose contributions to the cause are beyond dispute. Past winners include Congresswoman Jennifer Dunn, Spokane County Treasurer Michael Baumgartner, Spokane Public School Superintendent Dr. Shelley Redinger, and many more. In fact, 2 weeks ago in Bellevue, WPC honored businessman and former state legislator Kemper Freeman. As many of our Western Washington friends know, Kemper has been critical to the success of Bellevue and the advancement of free market ideals in Western Washington. So Kemper, thank you for being here tonight. Please stand. Here now to present this year's Champion of Freedom Award is another one of those past recipients. Former Central Washington Congressman Doc Hastings, who served Washington's 4th Congressional District for 2 decades.
Thank you very much. Shh. 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 I used to do that when I was presiding over the House of Representatives. It never worked there, though. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for allowing me to be the presenter tonight. George Nethercutt is not here, but I understand that that we are streaming live, and he is watching us from his home in Denver. So I'm going to make my remarks as if, George, you were right here. Now, George and I met, and if you remember, George, it was in 1994. 1994 was a pretty significant year, and I know this is a 501c3 organization, but I have to put on my political hat in order to talk about George and the relationship I have and what he's done. But we met in 1994. Now, for those of you that are political junkies, you may remember that 1994 was a very, very good year. From the standpoint of the U.S. House of Representatives, it was a contract with America year where we promised to address 10 issues in the first 100 days if you gave us the majority in the Congress. Well, the country responded, and in 1994, the U.S. House of Representatives was controlled by the Republicans for the first time in 40 years. George and I were part of that class. We represented the Eastern Washington part, but it was also very significant. It's also very significant for Washington State as a whole, because not only were George and I elected in 1994, but there are 4 other Republicans elected that year for a total of 6. Linda Smith was elected, Randy Tate, Rick White, and Jack Metcalf joined us. We elected more Republicans in Washington State in 1994 than any other state in the Union. I say that because that means there is hope. Now, there's another significant event in that same year, and this directly involved you, George, and that was that in the history of our country, prior to 1994, there has only been one Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives that was defeated for re-election as a standing Speaker, and that was in 1862. Well, fast forward 132 years, and it happened again, and George Nethercutt was the guy that took out the Speaker of the House in 1994. George, you did a heck of a job. Now, after we were elected, George and I used to kid, you know, which of the districts were the best districts in Eastern Washington. George, I have the microphone. I can tell you definitively which one it is. It's the 4th district, so I just want to make that clear. Although I respect those of you in the 5th, don't get offended by that. But George, when you were in Congress, you also played a very significant part in the late 90s because you were a member of the Appropriations Committee. And the Appropriations Committee, that's the committee that allocates where dollars are spent, federal dollars are spent. What is lost in history, unfortunately, is that during the late 90s, with Republican controls of the Congress, particularly in the House, and even with the Democrat president, we balanced the discretionary spending. In other words, we live within our means. Now, what a novel concept in this day and age that you can live within your means. And by the way, for the younger generation that is here, we're talking about trillions. I used to say that when you talk about anything that ends in ILLIONS, a million, billion, trillion, you know, you lose sight of it. But, and this is especially for the college students here, if you had an opportunity to spend $1 a minute, $1 a minute, do you know it would take you over 2,000 years to spend $1 trillion? Think about that. And so, George, what you did when you were on the Appropriation Committee, you had to make those choices. You had to make those choices on how you prioritize spending. If we had that attitude right now in Washington, D.C., and in Washington State, we'd be in much, much better shape. So, George, I just want to say that after you left Congress, your involvement did not end there. You started the Nethercutt Civics Foundation for people to learn about how the government works. And I remember several times you came back to my office with your students, and we visited in our office. And I thought you did a great job. So your legacy continues on and on and on. So, George, you're not here tonight, but I want to tell you that there are probably well over 1,000 people that are here, and I am very, very pleased to introduce you to them. You introduced me 6 years ago when I won this same award that you are receiving tonight. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mary Beth and George Nethercutt. George?
We are honored to be with you tonight, and thank you, Doc, for your kind introduction.
George and I are delighted to accept this award. We take great pride in having represented Washington State's 5th Congressional District. Our roots run deep in Spokane, and they always will. When George introduced Doc for his Champion of Freedom Award in 2015, George reminded Doc that he represented Eastern Washington's 2nd best congressional district.
No offense to our Central Washington friends, but we all know that's still true.
As a former board member, George was instrumental in securing and introducing leaders from across our great nation to keynote the Policy Center's annual dinner,
including J.C. Watts and Joe Lieberman.
We are now living in Denver near our children, Meredith and Elliot, and our new baby granddaughter. But we look forward to our summers at Priest Lake, where we spend time with our dearest of friends. In 2019, George was diagnosed with supranuclear palsy, a rare neurological condition. We are not in Spokane tonight because PSP impacts George's mobility, his vision, and his speech. But he insisted that I assure you that he is not in pain, and more importantly, that he works out 6 days a week. We thank you for your thoughts and prayers the past few years. George and I will continue to endorse the good works of the Washington Policy Center, and we encourage you to get involved.
Many thanks to Dan Mead Smith, the Washington Policy Center Board, and especially Chris Gargill for your courtesy and this award. I will treasure it forever.
Thank you.
Thanks so much to George and to Mary Beth, and we will be mailing George's plaque to him. And we wish the Nethercutt family all the very best. It's now time to hear from our keynote speaker. To introduce Dr. Ben Carson, please welcome Dr. Ed Schweitzer, the founder of Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories in Pullman. Dr. Schweitzer is one of the state's most inspiring and well-known business leaders, a consistent fighter for free markets and innovation. In 2019, he was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. Dr. Schweitzer.
Well, good evening, and thank you very much for your kind introduction, and thanks to the Washington Policy Center for giving me this privilege. Before I introduce our guest, let me take a moment to congratulate former Congressman George Nethercutt for receiving the Champion of Freedom Award. I met George also in 1994. He came down to visit SEL. We were only 124 people then. And he took the time to drive down and introduce himself. And I remember sitting in a little lunchroom, and he said, "I'm running for Congress." We had a very good conversation. And George, as a public servant, has been a true champion of freedom, a remarkable representative, respected on both sides of the aisle, proudly serving Eastern Washington. George, we wish you and Mary Beth could be here with us, and we also wish you the best. Our thoughts and prayers are with you as you courageously battle PSP. We are honored to be joined by George's colleagues, former Congressman Doc Hastings, Congressman Dan Newhouse, and Congresswoman Kathy McMorris Rogers, all exceptional leaders. Now I have the honor to introduce Dr. Ben Carson, someone I've admired for years and years. Dr. Carson's story reads like a novel, but it's real because America is a land of great opportunity, a land of many leaders like Dr. Ben Carson, making the world a better place. These are difficult times. Many feel discouraged, but our special guest is living proof that we can triumph over impossible odds. Dr. Carson was born in a low-income neighborhood in Detroit, Michigan. When he was 5, his parents divorced, and his mom, Sonia, with only a third-grade education, started doing domestic work to make ends meet. As a teenager, Ben had a violent temper and threatened to put him in jail until he turned to Scripture, like Proverbs 16:32. He who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules in spirit than he who captures a city. In high school, another supposedly impossible thing happened. Ben excelled and won a full-ride scholarship to Yale University and met his wonderful wife, Candy. After Yale, Ben went to medical school and at the age of only 33 years old became the youngest head of pediatric neurosurgery in the history of Johns Hopkins Children's Center. Many might say this is impossible nowadays. Pulling yourself up by faith, hard work, and talent, and being pushed up too by an insistent, wonderful mom. Our guest tonight would say otherwise. Dr. Carson has performed miracles on children that other surgeons wrote off as hopeless, saving hundreds, if not thousands, of young lives. As a good book says, when you save one life, it's as if you saved the world. Ben Carson has saved the world countless times over. May God bless you. He didn't stop there either. He retired, quote unquote, in 2013 at the height of the game, ran for President of the United States, and served us as Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. As Secretary, Dr. Carson expanded opportunity zones, increased affordable housing, and found homes for the homeless. I understand from talking with Representative Kathy McMorris Rogers that Dr. Carson's envisioned centers were pioneered here in her district and became a national and very successful model. Dr. Carson, yes, we should celebrate that. Dr. Carson believes in free enterprise. He knows, as Milton Friedman taught us, without economic freedom, there cannot be political freedom. Now he's leading the American Cornerstone Institute think tank, and he likes to call it a do tank, promoting the four cornerstones of our country: faith, liberty, community, and life. Please check it out at americancornerstone.org. We can all draw inspirations from Dr. Carson to push ourselves to innovate, to make the very best of our lives, and to triumph against every adversary, including poverty and pandemic. In Ben Carson's America, every child can overcome life's obstacles with faith, freedom, and hard work. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Dr. Ben Carson. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Well, it's good to be back in Washington again. No, seriously, it is. I used to be here often because I was on the Costco board for 16 years. I was the token conservative. But, now, before I start, I need to do something that most speakers do today, and that is make a disclaimer. My disclaimer is, I am not politically correct. So, it is not my intention to offend anyone. And if anyone is offended, too bad. But, you know, I actually very much dislike political correctness and wokeness and all this garbage because it's antithetical to some of the founding principles of this nation, like free speech. We should be able to talk the way we want to. We should be able to have the ideals that we really believe in. It's one of the reasons that people came to this nation from all over the country, from all over the world, so that they could live the lives they wanted to live. They could pursue the things that would make them happy, and they wouldn't have the heavy foot of some governing body on their neck all the time. And I think that we talk about freedom of speech. Some people say, but we still have freedom of speech, as long as the government doesn't restrict our speech. But you know what? If big tech and media can cancel you and can create all kinds of problems for you, and the government is complicit, it is exactly the same thing as the government imposing restrictions on your speech. And it's so important that we preserve all those freedoms. You know, Candy and I have visited 68 different countries. We've lived overseas and had a chance to experience a lot of things all over the world. But I got to tell you, there's really no place like America. And we are very fortunate to be here. And that's one of the reasons that it's so vitally important that we preserve this nation. When you think about all the others who've come before us and the things that they had to do in order that we could have the freedoms that we have today, we should not take it lightly. You know, I think about World War II and D-Day and all those young men invading the beach at Normandy. Some of them 16, 17, 18 years old, stepping over the bodies of their dead comrades, hundreds, 1,000 bodies laying there in the sand. Were they afraid? Did they turn back? Yes, they were afraid, but they did not turn back. They overwhelmed the Axis forces, knowing in many cases that they would never see their homeland or their loved ones again. Why did they do it? They didn't do it for themselves. They did it so that we could be free. And there's no way that we should ever neglect and denigrate the service of those great young men and also the great young women who went into the factories and built more airplanes and tanks and mortars than anybody could imagine. And you go back through war after war, effort after effort, and there have been brave and courageous Americans who have stepped to the forefront in order to preserve our freedoms. And now it's our turn. It's our turn to step up to the forefront and preserve our freedoms. And you think about the kind of nation that we have, you know. I grew up in dire poverty, and it was something that I really hated. You know, some people hate snakes, some people hate rats, roaches, but I hated poverty. I just couldn't stand it for some strange reason. And, but I was also a horrible student. Probably the worst student you've ever seen in your life. And all the kids used to tease me and call me dummy. And I didn't like it. I didn't let them know I didn't like it, but I really hated the way they teased me. But I was particularly good at getting other people kicked out of class. That's how I got back. I would study my classmates and figure out what made them really, really angry. And then I would just irritate them until they were about to explode. But I would never push the last button to make them explode until we were in class and the teacher was nearby. Then they would explode and the teacher would kick them out and I would say, yes! Because I wouldn't be the only one who didn't learn anything that day. But there was this one girl. Now, you all know this girl. Some of you were her. Miss Goody Two-Shoes. Everything perfect, pristine, made everybody else look like a total jerk. I said, wouldn't it be great to get her kicked out of class? So I figured out what made her angry. I can tell you the steam was coming out of her ears. She was about to explode. And she was sitting right in the seat in front of me. And as the teacher approached, I said, now I'll push the last button. But she didn't explode. She just quietly turned around, said, you and me on the playground at recess. So that didn't work out all that well. But you know, I think about some of the kids today and what they have to go through. Can you imagine what it must be like to be a little kid today? First of all, you got to wear a mask. You got to go to school with a mask on. You don't get to correlate facial expressions with what people are saying. That's a very important part of the sociological development process. We don't even know what the ramifications of that will end up being. And then you're told you may be carrying some horrible, deadly disease. And even though you may not feel sick, you may give it to your grandmother. Well, unfortunately, grandmothers do get older, and they do die. Now you got somebody feeling guilty about that. And then if they're white, they're told that they're oppressors. They and their ancestors are responsible for all the ills in the world. If they're black or some other minority, they're a victim. They can't possibly succeed because of this systemically racist society that we live in. All of this is happening while they're trying to develop their self-image. Think about that. And then if that's not bad enough, they may not be a girl or a boy. Now think about that. Can you imagine doing that to our children? I actually think it's child abuse, to be honest with you. And, you know, it makes me think back to Nikita Khrushchev in the late 50s and the early 60s in conversation with the white David Eisenhower, who was president. He said, your grandchildren's children will live under communism, and we won't have to fire a shot. What do you think he was talking about? He knew that in order to convert this nation, you would never do it on the fields, the battlefields. But he knew there was another way to do it. All you have to do is gain control of the educational system so you can indoctrinate the kids. You know, it was Vladimir Lenin who said, give me your children to teach for 4 years and the seed that I plant will never be uprooted. That's a part of a plan. The other thing you have to do is gain control of the media so that you could spoon feed the populace. Only what you wanted them to hear. Don't give them what you don't want them to hear. Manipulate them. And you know, the media is kind of stupid. And I'll tell you why. What they have not realized is that the first thing that communist regimes do is control the media. They're slitting their own throat, and they don't even know it. And then the other thing you have to do is you have to replace faith in God with faith in government. And the last thing you have to do is you have to raise the national debt to extreme levels so that you can justify massive taxation, redistribution of wealth, and total dependency on the government. Does any of that sound familiar? And you know, that's not a Democrat thing or Republican thing. That's something that all Americans need to understand. And you have to understand what you're up against if you're going to effectively resist it. You can't merely go along and just say what's on TV tonight and who's playing football. But we've got to be concerned about the impact of all of these things. And another crucial thing is we can't fall for the tactic of divide and conquer. There are people who are trying to divide us on virtually every level: age, income, race, sex, political affiliation, you name it. They're trying to divide the American people. And I gotta tell you, we, the American people, are not each other's enemies, and we cannot allow that to succeed. And you think about our national symbol, the eagle, who soars majestically above the mountains, the plains, and the valleys. Why can he do that? Because he has two wings, a right wing and a left wing. He can't do it with two right wings, can't do it with two left wings. But if you can get them to work together, you've got the majestic symbol of our nation. We need to remember that. The other thing that's so important in a place where an organization like the Washington Policy Center can make a big difference is bringing back logic and common sense. Wouldn't that make a difference? When you think about some of the things that are going on right now, let's talk about, let's say, energy. Now, we were at a place where we were energy independent. We had the cleanest air and water since measurements have been done, a net exporter of energy. We controlled our own energy destination. Not too long ago, that was the case. And now look where we are. Now, what would a logical person do? A logical person who was interested in green energy, but who had all the things that I just mentioned. A logical person would say, I'm going to keep all the stuff that we have while I work simultaneously on developing new renewable energy sources. Instead of saying, because somebody I don't like did this, I'm getting rid of it. That's stupid. That's just plain dumb. And again, stupidity has nothing to do with Democrats or Republicans. You got stupid people in both parties. There's no question about it. But the good thing is, you also have smart people in both parties. There are more smart people in one than the other. I'm not saying anything, but you know, I'm not mentioning any names or parties. But at any rate, you know, when you're talking about logic and common sense, it's good to be able to look at the facts. It's good to be able to look at the evidence. And you think about something like COVID. You know, I was on the task force, and it was interesting to see some of the discussions that were going on, led by various people, the names of which I will not mention, who just denigrated all the therapeutics. There were a lot of things that many studies and many medical professionals had used around the world very effectively, and they were just, no, those are terrible things. They'll make everything worse. Don't do it. You think about that. Why would anybody do something like that? Well, if you know how our system works, in order to get an emergency use authorization, there cannot be other viable treatments. And therefore, you have to poo-poo all of those. That's just plain stupid. That's not logical. What we should do is eliminate that requirement for an EUA so that you can work on things simultaneously. You can work on a vaccine, and you can also use therapeutics that work, which are now coming to light, and we see that they work, and they could have saved hundreds of thousands of lives in this country. And we have to stop mixing politics with medicine if we want to make progress. And also, if we were logical, we would recognize that people who've had COVID and subsequently have natural immunity, which seems to be much better than vaccine-induced immunity, should not be forced to take a vaccine. Doesn't make any sense. And I have yet to find anybody who can explain why that should be the case. Why should you, if you're already immunized naturally, and it's more effective than the immunization you get from a vaccine, why would you then expose yourself to additional risk of taking a vaccine when you don't need it? Same thing applies, quite frankly, to children. You know, the children have natural immunity for the most part. They have much less incidence of complications and death. But we don't know what the long-term implications are for the vaccine for the children. So why would you expose them to an unknown future risk when you know that the present risk is so small, and also we have therapeutics that can be used? Again, it doesn't make sense. And that's why it's so important that organizations like the WPC exist to stimulate these conversations, because, see, it doesn't do any good for people to get in their respective corners and to hurl hand grenades at each other and to throw insults, because it just pushes people further into their corners. But what we need are intelligent conversations with the facts put on the middle of the table. And you can bring people from various viewpoints, but let the conversation be based on the facts and not on ideology. And that's how we can begin to make a lot of progress. Now, earlier this week, my wife and I just finished our new manuscript called Created Equal, which is a logical pushback against critical race theory, which is and here's my major issue with critical race theory. It wants our young people to believe that the most important determinant of what happens to you in life is the color of your skin. Now, let's recognize that we as human beings are made in the image of God. And that's special. Now, what is it that makes each of us who we are? Is it our skin color? Is it the texture of our hair? Is it the shape of our nose? Or is it our brain? And you think about that. The brain is this distinguishing factor. Now, if you take the brain of a human being and put it against the brain of an animal, let's say a dog, surface topography is quite similar in both cases. However, the dog's brain has a much more developed midbrain. The midbrain allows you to react. So that's why animals react so quickly compared to people. But people have much bigger, well-developed frontal lobes, where you engage in rational thought processing, where you can extract information from the past and the present, integrate it into a plan for the future, where you can assess a situation. Don't just react to a situation like an animal. Critical race theory says, no, react to what you see. Act like an animal. Don't use your higher faculties. Isn't that exactly what Dr. Martin Luther King was talking about when he said people should be judged not on the basis of the color of their skin, but the content of their character? That's exactly what he's talking about. And just a brief word about systemic racism. Why has that become such an issue? Because if you can say that the whole system is racist, you don't have to give examples of what you're talking about. You can just say everything is racist, no matter what it is. What a bunch of garbage. And if we had a systemically racist system, why do people of color form caravans trying to get in here? Are they stupid? I don't think so. Have all the people who are here already been telling them lies, just trying to get them to come? I don't think so. That's not the way it works. And, you know, as far as things like the wealth gap that exists between blacks and whites, that's a real problem. Secondary largely to home ownership and issues that have allowed people to pass things down. And we obviously need to look at those issues, but is that because of systemic racism, or is there something else? If you look at Ghanaians and Nigerians, there's no wealth gap. Now, if you know any Nigerians, then you know in that home, a bachelor's degree is the baseline. There is a tremendous emphasis on family and education. That should teach us something about how important it is to educate our populace, to give people school choice, and to make sure that they are actually being taught critical math and critical English and critical civics and not critical silly race theory. But, you know, in order to do all the things that I just have been talking about for the last 25 minutes, which means I need to get off the stage, it requires courage, extreme courage. It's much easier to just go stand in a corner and put your head down and hope somebody doesn't call you a nasty name. But that doesn't work. Where do we get courage from? I remember when I was a neurosurgery resident, I was on call one night. It was a night there was a neurosurgery conference going on in Boston. All the attendings were there except the one that they left to cover emergencies. And I was the resident on call, and in came a young man brought in by the medics, unconscious, having been beaten severely with a baseball bat. and CAT scan demonstrated hemorrhages in his brain, massive swelling. He was going to die unless a dramatic surgery was done, removing part of his temporal lobe and part of his frontal lobe, as well as some of the blood clot. That was an operation that I had seen before. I'd never done it before. And besides that, I needed an attending neurosurgeon anyway to take someone to the operating room legally. So I called for the attending, couldn't reach him. Had the paging operator call for him, couldn't reach him. The nurses called for him, couldn't reach him. Patient was dying. What was I to do? Should I take him to the operating room and do an operation that I had never done before, illegally without an attending? Or should I take the safe route and just say there was no attending and let him die? I prayed and I asked God to tell me what to do, to give me the courage to do whatever I needed, the wisdom to do. And I took him to the operating room, and everything came back to me. It was crystal clear what to do. And the operation was successful. And that young man today is a child psychologist doing just fine. But the key thing there was I didn't get chastised when all the attendings got back. In fact, I was praised for doing the right thing. But the courage to act when you don't know what the outcome is going to be, but you know that it is the only opportunity people have, that is what will save America. America will not be saved by the government, because governments do what governments do. They grow, they infiltrate, and they control. It's their natural tendency, like a lion. Lions kill gazelles and they eat them, not because they're bad animals, but because they're lions. This is what governments do. That is why our founders, our very intelligent, wise founders, spent so much time creating the Constitution to give we, the people, the tools that they needed to control the government. That's why. And that was what we tried to do at HUD during the time I was there. We were able to get an incredible amount done. We had one of the things that I have to mention that made a big difference is we had 10 regional administrators covered the whole country, and we empowered them. People, there are a couple of them that are here tonight. Chris Patterson and Jeff McMorris are here tonight. But, you know, we had some of the very best people in government, which is why we were able to turn that agency completely around. You used to hear all these horrible stories about all the fiscal malfeasance going on at HUD. You don't hear those. You haven't heard those for a few years. You may hear them again soon. But you know, I hear them. Because it does make a difference, the kind of people, and whether they have courage to go up against the status quo. And this is what we must remember. Everyone in this room has a tremendous sphere of influence. And we must use that correctly if we're going to preserve the freedoms that we have in this nation. And the next time that you're singing the national anthem, please don't just let those words roll off your tongue when you get to the end of that first stanza, where it says, land of the free and home of the brave. But remember, in fact, it is impossible to be the land of the free if you're not the home of the brave. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Carson. Thank you for sharing your inspiring message with us today and sharing your sphere of influence with all of us in Eastern Washington. Dr. Carson joins a very exclusive group at the Washington Policy Center that has received both our Champion of Freedom Award and tonight our Columbia Award. In grateful recognition of your leadership and years of public service as Secretary of the Housing and Urban Development, in promoting freedom for all, and for your pioneering work as a pediatric neurosurgeon in healing the most vulnerable, we present to you tonight the 2021 Columbia Award. Spokane, Washington, October 15th, 2021. Congratulations.
Thank you, Dr. Carson, and congratulations. We're pleased to announce that Dr. Carson will be signing many of his books in the Cedar Room, that is just to our south, until about 10 o'clock tonight. You're welcome to get in an orderly line, no pushing, to get your signed copy. And please try to space out and keep your distance as well. A special thanks and congratulations to our Champion of Freedom Award recipient, Congressman George Nethercutt tonight. As well as Kemper Freeman. And thanks to WPC's great event team and the terrific staff here at the Davenport Grand Hotel, which made tonight possible. We hope you're leaving this evening feeling inspired and ready to join WPC by supporting its work and getting involved. Please make sure that your donation cards get inside of those red envelopes that are on your table. And you can also donate online by scanning the QR code in your program as well. Donations, remember, are tax deductible. For the staff and board of WPC, thank you for joining us tonight. We'll see you at future events across Eastern Washington over the next 12 months. Thank you so much.